All right, mic check, I'm good. So I'm Ceron, CWB Association Welding podcast. Today we have a really cool guest, Welding podcast.
The show is about to begin.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the CWB Association podcast. My name is Ceron and we are here in Moncton, New Brunswick for CanWeld 2023. It has been a great 3 days. We have been going hard. The sessions have been fantastic. And one of the presenters here at the conference is my friend Eduardo here already. And we're going to be talking about some of the amazing things we're doing this week. So Eduardo Alvarez Rocha, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Fantastic. Very glad to be here. Reuniting with all the community from across Canada, so very exciting.
So you are a University of Alberta master's student right now in the sciences. What is it exactly that you're working on in terms of your master's?
In terms of my master's, up to date, we've just been working on a voltage model for gas metal arc welding, primarily in spray transfer. And now we're doing some work in conjunction with some students from Peru. So essentially developing a machine learning algorithm that can process high-speed video to provide metrics for us to validate models such as arc length, deposition rates, size of droplets, etc.
So this work, and we're going to get to this later in the show, but what was the inspiration for you to follow this path?
I think the inspiration, the original topic, obviously was pitched by Dr. Mendez, Patricio Mendez, my professor at the university. He essentially just said, "Hey, ask the question. Hey, can you do this work? Tell me what the arc length is." Well, obviously leveraging my experience as a welder, because I was a welder before I was an engineer. And I said, yeah, sure. So one thing led to another. And I said, okay, well, I think we really need to look a little bit deeper into this. I want to do some experiments, process some high-speed videos. Once I started processing the high-speed videos and measuring by hand, I said, hey, you know what? This is really time-consuming and really laborsome to do it all by hand. Why don't we leverage some new technology? Why don't we try leveraging some new technology and see what we can do? And well, of course, with enough determination and perseverance, sky's the limit. So so far the results have been pretty good. So
awesome. So you alluded to being a welder previous. So let's go to square one. So where were you born?
I was born in Mexico City, Mexico City, Mexico.
Yeah,
that's right.
And so you were born in Mexico City, which if no one's ever been to Mexico City, it is the crown jewel of Mexico. It's beautiful. It's a wonderful city with great history. I've been there many times. I find that in Canada, people are always like hitting the coasts and don't check out the main DF, right? So it's magical. So, you're born in Mexico City. I assume your parents are both Mexican?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. How are you now at the U of A? So there was, at what age did you leave Mexico?
Yes. So maybe I should start just before that and how we ended up leaving Mexico.
Okay.
So my parents, I guess I'll start with my parents. So my parents, from my mom's side, she was a professor at the university in Mexico, so the UNAM, Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México. And she traveled the world doing conferences, sharing her research. She was a biochemist. My dad is a veterinarian. They actually met when they were in a university. And upon my, in one of
your birth? No.
No. In one of my mom's conferences, they divorced when I was young. But
okay.
My mom traveled the world doing conferences. She went to Argentina. Did a few trips to the States, often went to the States. And in one of those trips, she met a doctor that offered her, hey, do you want to come do a research stint here at Oregon State University? So that's how we ended up leaving Mexico.
And so it's you and your mom?
Me and my mom at this time.
Any siblings come with you?
No, I'm only child.
Okay, all right.
So, and before we left, maybe 6 months before, probably about a year before we left, it was in the works. The coals were in the fire, they're like, okay, we're getting ready to leave. And
how old are you at this point?
At this point, I think I was 8.
Okay.
Like 7 or 8. And it was one day after school. I said, hey, why don't we go rent a movie? And okay, so we went to the movie store, just a few blocks down from where we were living, close to the UNAM. And I saw The Mighty Ducks, the movie.
Yeah.
I think it was the second one. And so I grabbed the movie. I was
Classic.
like, hey, we put it in, and then it only took me one try, or sorry, one time to watch it, and I completely fell in love with it. I was like, hey, I want to try hockey.
Mhm.
Like, okay, kid from Mexico. Do we even have a hockey rink in Mexico? So it turns out we had 4. My mom quickly learned because she would drive me every day.
Yeah.
So I started learning how to skate. And then my grandparents were always very supportive. Actually, my grandfather was like a father figure for me because I pretty much grew up with him while I was studying. So anyway, so
Learn to skate. Yeah.
They would always encourage me. They would bring me, my grandparents in the weekend would bring me to the hockey rink. They even paid private lessons for me to learn well, because I was so passionate. So I love the hockey rink. So I said, Mom, you can go to Oregon with me. I will go with you, but I must be able to play hockey.
Yeah, that was the deal.
That was the deal. So then she said, okay, because I mean, we were so close to the hockey rink in Mexico. And if we were moving to Corvallis, Oregon, there was no hockey rink there. I was like, hey, well,
How is there
what's
no
going on here?
hockey rink in Oregon?
In Corvallis, Oregon. So
Okay,
the
yeah.
closest hockey rink at that time in Corvallis, Oregon was in Eugene. So that's where the University of Oregon is. Oregon State University is in Corvallis. So I think it was about a 45-minute drive. And my mom, as supportive as she was, she would drive me every weekend to Eugene. Lucky for me, in Corvallis, there was a roller hockey rink. So when it wasn't raining, so for those of you that are listening and have been to Oregon, as you know,
It rains a lot.
it rains a lot. So if but in the summertime, it's very, very hot. So summertimes I was out in the roller hockey rink. In the wintertime during hockey season, I was in Eugene. And then we would travel around, go to Portland and Washington and Seattle. And we actually came up one time to Vancouver to play against Vancouver. And it was pretty entertaining because, well, they would skate around us, right? Because they're Canadian.
Because they're Canadian.
And then that's when I said, you know what? I think we need to move to Canada.
Yeah. Well, and like 20% of the players in the NHL are Canadian.
Yeah. I was like, well, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
So anyways, that's how we ended up leaving Mexico. After the research stint was done there, we ended up making some connections in Canada, so in Edmonton, and we had some friends, actually colleagues of my mom that she knew from l'UNAM, actually a visiting professor from Revelstoke that went to UNAM. So she's like, hey, why don't we come visit us? We have a house in Revelstoke. So we said, okay, you know what? Why don't we just take some time? Because my mom was taking a year off. So she's like, why don't we just go to Edmonton? And on the way, let's stop in Revelstoke. So we stopped in Revelstoke, went to hockey camp there in the summer. I was like, oh, this is awesome.
Well, and that's a beautiful part of the country, right? Yeah.
And then we ended up going to Edmonton, and the rest is history. We fell in love with it. My mom was like,
So how old are you when you got to Edmonton?
11.
11. So
11.
it was only in the States for 3 years then.
2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you end up in Edmonton, Alberta. And it was like to live. Your mom's looking for work. It's yeah.
So we ended up being able to immigrate. Canada's a wonderful place. A lot of opportunity.
Lots of hockey.
Lots of hockey. And my mom, with her background and profession, she was able to pick it up. And essentially we were able to stay.
Yeah. Now, as a young person, playing hockey, and were you good? Like, I mean, not to sound like a jerk, but like, were you good enough that this is like, you're thinking like, I might have a run at this,
I think when we first moved, I got to see like where the caliber was at. And obviously I was actually, let's start with this. I came to meet my friend, who we knew from my hockey team in Oregon, and they were Canadian, or their mom was Canadian. So they said, hey, why don't you, if you guys are staying, why don't you go try out for his team? So I was like, okay, yeah, no problem. Yeah, like, of course.
Sounds awesome. Yeah.
So I went, and I think it was like, they were trying out for like tier 5 or something like that. And I think I did pretty well because the coaches from like tier 2 and 3 were like, hey, why don't you come like try out for tier 2 or tier 3? I can't remember that time. So I made the team, like I think it was like tier 3 at that time. So I mean, coming from Mexico, making tier 3, I was like, okay, this is not bad.
Yeah.
And I got great mentorship from my coaches. And then they said, you know what, like I was small. I mean, I'm not very tall.
Yeah.
Like, why don't you go take a hitting camp?
Get more buff, right?
Learn how to move your body, because I guess my raw talent was skating. Like, I was a pretty fast skater. So I ended up training, and I ended up making to the Alberta Cup. So it's like the top 40 Edmonton players when I was 14 from Edmonton. So I would say I did pretty well coming from Mexico and learning how to skate when I was 8. So yeah.
And how was the transition to schools? Like, you leave school in Mexico, it would have been like grade 4 or 5, and then you get to Oregon, you're there for a couple of years, so that puts you at grade like 6 or 7, and then you're moving to Alberta. How were these changes for you as a young person?
It was quite interesting. So when I was in Mexico, I went to a very good school. It was a private school. I was there from 8 in the morning till 5 p.m. every day, and after 3 we were like swimming or doing some sort of sports. And when I went to the States, I was also in a pretty good school, but I was very frustrated because even though I didn't know how to speak fluent English, I felt that
you weren't doing as good.
I was a little bit higher, especially with math. So my grandpa was actually a high school math student, math teacher. So he would always mentor me, and that's how I kind of grew to like math. So when I came to the States, I was like, I'm very frustrated. So I ended up skipping a grade when I was in the States. So I did like 5 and 6 like in 1 year, and then when I came to Canada, I started in grade 7. So it was a very dynamic as a child. I was away from my grandparents, who had never left their side. I was just with my mom. I hadn't seen my dad.
New school. You're the youngest kid in class.
Youngest kid in class, but I was with my mom and I was playing hockey. So for me, that was like
you're good.
Number one. That was good. Yeah.
And how did you find the education system in Canada? Did you still feel like it was like too slow or too far behind?
No, I felt it was good. At the same time, I had skipped already a year, so I was younger. So I was. I think it was good. Yeah.
So now let's start going through the timeline. You're graduating high school in Edmonton. You're a top 40 hockey player. What's the plan coming out of high school?
So I mean, after a few years of being in Edmonton, as good as people might have it in their own country, coming to Canada, being an immigrant, tough times do come eventually. So we definitely went through a rough patch there for sure. And we couldn't afford hockey anymore. So that my last year midget, I could no longer afford to play. So that was pretty heartbreaking for me. So I ended up working to help my mom. At that time, she wasn't able to find a job as a professor in the university. So she ended up starting a new degree. She became a nurse, an RN. So while I was in school, she was finishing her degree, and I was working at Chili's. I was in the back. I was cooking after school. I started playing guitar. Well, I had always played guitar since I was like 7 years old. So I joined a band. I started playing lots of music. And when I finished school, I knew I wanted to do something with math. My grandfather instilled that into me. He also had a late career change in his life. He was a lieutenant general.
Military?
Lieutenant colonel in the military in Mexico. And he had a leg accident late in his career. So the army just paid for him to, go do something else. Yeah. So then he became a math teacher in high school. So for me, the plan for after school was like, hey, I want to do engineering. That was always my thing. It's something to do with math, either architecture or engineering. But money wasn't there, and I guess my mindset wasn't there. My mom had just finished school, so I was just not there. So I said, I'll take a year off, and I'll save up some money, and then I'll go do engineering. And that is where welding stepped into my life. So that was pretty much where I reached out. Some friends were working in a fab shop in Edmonton, and they said, "Hey, we're looking for people." This was 2005 at the time, big oil boom coming.
Yeah.
So I said, "Okay, yeah, well, why not? Let's do this." So I went in, I put my application, and just to bring things into perspective, how busy it was at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I literally dropped off my resume at the front desk, and then I was stepping out, and then the receptionist said, "Hey, like, do you have time for an interview?" So then I went into the back. The shop manager said, "Hey, like, can you start on Sunday?" I think it was like a Thursday.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, I just gotta do this drug and alcohol test, and then come in on Sunday." I was like, "Oh, okay." So then I went to the thing. I called him. He's like, "Okay, start Sunday, graveyard shift. I need you here at 12 at midnight."
Wow.
So then that was the beginning of a whole new chapter for me. So
and how old are you at this point?
At that point, I was 17.
17,
because
okay.
I graduated a year earlier, right?
Right.
So yeah, I was 17 when that started.
So, for a kid who has basically academic parents and family, people in academia, and you've kind of followed your mom as your mentor around with her profession, and now you're going into welding in a fab shop as a 17-year-old. And so in Alberta, there's a mandatory apprenticeship. So like you're signing papers, you're kind of signing your life away to go work as a welder.
Mm-hmm.
What did your mom think about this?
She thought I was so brave. She's like, "Hey, this is completely new. There's lots of opportunity here."
Mm-hmm.
She encouraged it. I think the summer before that, like right after high school, I started doing bridge construction,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just like helping with like shovel and something. And then she would come to me and she's like, "Hey, like, this is just temporary, right? Like you are gonna go to school or something.
Yeah.
Like, I know you would want to, so just think about the future." So I told her I was taking a year off. So when I started the welding thing, at first it was just a job.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't even an apprenticeship at that point.
Yeah.
2 months later, they came to me and said, "Hey, like, you've swept the floors really well for the last 2 months. Would you like to do an apprenticeship?" So I said, "Okay." At that time, we were just like recovering. Like, my mom had just finished university again. So I said, "Hey, like, Mom, like, this is a pretty good opportunity. They're going to pay for my apprenticeship. They're going to pay me while I'm there. And then when I come back, I'm going to get a raise." So,
earn while you learn.
You know what?
Yeah.
And I'm actually liking it. They're fabricating vessels. It's pretty exciting, like big machinery. Welding looks very, very fun. So I think I'm going to do it. And she's like, "Yeah, do it. Like, for sure, do it." And that's where I started my apprenticeship.
So you start out as a welder in a fab shop, which is a good place because generally the welding's new construction. It's usually pretty controlled environments and stuff like that. You said you looked at welding and it was exciting.
Yeah.
What was exciting about it? And then when you started, did you catch the bug right away?
Yeah. Okay. So I think what was exciting about it for me, very good question. For me, it was, since it was such a like big scale manufacturer, what was exciting for me is seeing what was the input, what was the output.
Mm-hmm.
Raw steel. I mean, we were bringing plate from like all
Just
over
plate,
the world,
yeah.
And it was just plate,
Yeah.
1/4 inch thick,
Cut, form,
12 inch
yeah,
thick,
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Then you see it get cut. Then you see it get formed.
Yeah.
Then you see it get
Processed.
welded
Yeah.
together, so
Yeah.
joined
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
And to me, that was pretty amazing, right?
Yeah.
It was very different from carpentry, right?
Mhm.
Because I mean, if you
Let's
cut
not
too
talk
short,
about carpentry.
okay, right? But for me, that was amazing, and I had some exposure in high school. I took a fab shop class,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember from my fab shop days, like, I actually enjoyed it. Like join two pieces of metal together.
Mhm.
That was awesome, and now I got to see it in big scale. I said, "Hey, like, this is really something."
And now you're under the hood. You're getting your first gigs, and you're needing to start burning rod. I mean, when you first start, you don't get to do those welds yet, right? Did it feel like the right thing, like the right choice? Once you started staring at that little blue light.
So when I first started, before they let me touch any stinger, I became really good at oxyacetylene cutting.
Oh, good. That's a very important skill. Yeah.
So we ended up at first you were cutting scrap metal,
Mhm.
and then you're cutting shells,
Yeah.
putting bevels on massive shells. Then when I proved that, like, hey, like, okay, we'll put you on the head trimmer. So then I started beveling heads, large heads, small heads, cladded heads, starting to use the plasma cutter. And I really enjoyed that because I was like, hey, look, I would always look at the light, look at the cut, look at the kerf lines.
Just that perfectionist.
That perfection.
Yeah,
and then all of a sudden you start getting an error, like, okay, let's fine tune this.
Yeah.
And then I would quickly be able to troubleshoot it. So I really like that aspect of it.
And, when did you do your first term of apprenticeship?
I think it was 2007. 2007. Yeah.
And you did it in Alberta or in Edmonton? Sorry,
at Nate.
Yeah, at Nate. So how was that experience?
It was awesome because I had been I graduated in 2005, so I had been a couple years out of school. So going back to the classroom felt nice for me.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, learning things again, and since I already had exposure to it,
it all starts to make sense. Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
You see things, and then you come to the classroom, and then you're like, oh, this is why, and then you want to learn more. So 2007 is when I first started, and then I went back to the shop. And then after I left for my second and third year, I said, you know what, I'm going to try to do those back to back or close to back to back. And once I finish my second, I'm going to go to the field. And that's when I started doing shutdowns. I think it was 2007.
Okay.
I started working maintenance work for mainly coal fire plants.
Okay.
And then that's when I got my first exposure to like TIG welding.
Yeah.
Guys literally just in the tightest spots, doing the toughest welds, like sticking their hands in between like all the elements. And I was like, okay, you know what? That requires skill. And then I definitely looked up to those guys and I said, okay, I'm going to go back right away, do my third year. And I want to come back as soon as possible doing that because that looked really, really fun.
So I feel like at this point, you're a pretty good welder. Like you're usually not having those thoughts unless you're pretty comfortable with what you know already. So, working in this shop, sounds like you're beveling huge plates. That would equal welding huge plates after. Your skill level. Are you top 40 welder now too?
Well, I mean,
you were pretty good.
I was okay, I guess. I used to get name hired from time to time.
Good.
I don't know if it was because I was a good welder or because I was skinny and short, so I could fit in those tight spaces, right?
Hey man, skinny and short. I mean, I was never that skinny, but being short was beneficial for work for me too. It's like, hey, you can get under there. You're not going to complain. Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, people will get mad at me like, oh, why are you doing that? I'm like, I don't know. It's like a challenge.
Right? Yeah. So now you're welding, and is it not the career for the rest of your life? Is this not what you're thinking? You're like, this is going well. I got good money. Did you get your red seal?
Yeah. I got my red seal. I got my B pressure. Actually, first time, first try, I got my B pressure, which was a challenge in itself. But I think it came with a lot of preparation. I went through a good training course at the Boilermaker Union Hall in Edmonton, and I just kept practicing and practicing and practicing. And then I would come home and I would like.
Dreaming about it.
Yeah, I would even tell my mom about it, and she's like, "Oh, you should make it should almost be like a ritual, right?
Yeah,
like count your rods, like
Yeah.
And at the end of it, I was like, I knew exactly how many rods I needed, and I would just burn it out. I knew how long it took me, and by the time I got to the test, you're nervous because it's like very low pass rate at that time. We were using 60-10 for the root pass. I think they took that away after I did the test, but it was. Honestly, to this day, if I think back, like, what was one of your highs in your life is like passing my B pressure in my first try. For me, that was like, wow, right? So that was pretty exciting.
And you're still, at this point, you're still thinking this is your career.
So no, at this point, because remember, welding was only like a 1-year thing. I was like, I want to go back to university. But then I took the detour and I really enjoyed it. So once I got my B pressure, I said, okay, I think the Monday after, I think if I got my B on the Friday, on the Monday, I was like, I got to go practice my TIG. I got to get my TIG and my small bore, all that stuff. And then at that time, they were offering this $2,000 incentive through the hall to get your alloy, all your alloys.
Okay.
TIG. So I said, you know what? It was just before turnaround time. There wasn't that much work. So I was like, you know what? I'm going in the hall every day anyway. I'll just keep that routine and see what happens. At this point, I wasn't thinking of a date when I was going back, but in the back of my head, I was like, I do want to go do engineering. So when I got all my alloy tickets, I went into work in the oil sands, and I built a cogen, did a lot of the return bends and stuff like that. And that was fun. I got to weld in like reformer furnaces, do a lot of like heavy welding canal and like transfer lines. And that was awesome because it was like very, very detailed. Then you start dealing with like old material that creep damage.
Right.
I remember actually one time I was welding on a transfer line. It was 14 inches in diameter. It was like 4 inches thick. And I remember we did this beautiful job. And actually at that time I was welding with a Chilean, a guy from Chile who came during the boom. Great welder. Taught me a lot about welding for sure. So I welded with him for a couple of years. And I remember we welded this beautiful joint, right? But it was old.
Yeah.
And we capped it. And, it took us a couple of weeks because I think the pipe fitters cut it too short or something. And then we had to
Of course they did.
We had to do like 3D printing with TIG to build up the wall.
Additive manufacturing.
And then we ended up welding the joint, and then we PT'd it, and there was this perfect line all the way around, but it wasn't in the weld.
Like an inch over.
It was the parent metal.
Yeah.
And I said, let's start digging it out. And then we went all the way. We had to get a machinist. We went all the way to the root, and we had to do metallography. And then at that point, I was like, you know what? I think it's time I go back to school.
Yeah. I gotta figure out why this is happening.
So interesting, right?
Yeah.
So that's actually that year. 2011 is when I went back. I got accepted to the University of Alberta, and then I started my mechanical engineering degree in 2011.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, let's take our break now for the suppliers, because this is the perfect time that when we come back from the message from our sponsors is that we'll talk about that journey into the U of A and how being a welder affects being an engineer today, which I think is what a lot of people, wonder if that's like the perfect mix, right? So stay tuned. Don't go anywhere here on the CWB Association podcast. We'll be back right after this message.
The CWB Association is new and improved and focused on you. We offer a free membership with lots of benefits to anyone interested in joining an association that is passionate about welding. We are committed to educating, informing, and connecting our workforce. Gain access to your free digital publication of the Weld magazine, free online training, conferences, and lots of giveaways. Reach out to your local CWB Association chapter today to connect with other welding professionals and share welding as a trade in your community. Build your career, stay informed, and support the Canadian welding industry. Join today and learn more at cwbassociation.org.
And we are back here on the CWB Association podcast here in Moncton, New Brunswick during CanWeld 2023. Today's special guest here is Eduardo. How are you doing, Eddie?
Oh, great. Thank you.
So right before the break, we were talking about you finishing up your red seal, getting your B pressure, so that's F3, F4, then you're off to the F5, F6 world, and then you're getting your ink canals. Those are the 44s and 40s, and now you're like, okay, I want to go back to engineering. And you look up the U of A's engineering program, and you go sign up, and September rolls around, it's time to go. Did you talk to your mom and say, look, welding is over, I'm quitting school, I'm going back full time, and this is it now? I'm going to be a student for the next 4 to 6 years.
Yeah. So I guess like a year before getting admitted, I already had the bug in my ear. Really.
Yeah.
It was just a matter of going through the motions and applying. And I actually had a friend from high school that was in engineering and knew my current professor, Professor Mendez. So anyway, I was introduced, and I was like, hey, like U of A sounds pretty cool. So then I told my mom, of course. She was ecstatic. So I was like, hey, I'm going to go back to university. I think I'll do mechanical, and I have some contact. I know there's a welding lab, so this is pretty good place. And at that time, obviously after working for so long, it's a definite like hard transition. I had bought a house with my mom at that time, so it was close to the university. So it was a good spot to be in. And luckily, thanks to the boom, I was able to save enough money to support myself through university, right? So obviously the first bit was hard because you're competing with kids that just got out of high
They're
school.
fresh with knowledge.
And you're sitting there, welding for 10, 12 hours a day, and then coming back and you're like, oh, I have a steep learning curve to
and it's hard to stay awake. It's hard to stay awake in the beginning because you're not used to sitting in a desk anymore, right? Yeah. And as you rolled into the program, why mechanical engineering right off the top? Why not like a materials engineering, which generally is closer to welding in a lot of
Yeah.
ways? What was it about mechanical that
It was a very tough decision, actually. It was a very tough decision. When I started, big competition. Obviously, they're trying to weed people out. I think the first year that's like starts with 900, and right off the bat, people start dropping, right?
Yeah.
So I think before even thinking mechanical engineering is like survival. Am I going to survive, or will I just become a statistic, right?
Yeah.
So I think my focus at first was get through the first year, and then after the first year, you get to select whether you go into whatever discipline.
Yeah.
Each discipline requires a certain GPA. Mechanical was one of the higher GPAs to get into. Materials was a little bit lower, so everyone wanted to go into mechanical. I think everyone's excited about mechanical. For me, I liked the idea of mechanical because I'd been working with maintaining and building
Like stuff.
mechanical
Yeah.
equipment.
Yeah.
So for me, it was okay. Well, do I want to be designing the pressure vessels, or looking at like piping repairs or vessel repairs, or do I want to do like more welding specific, things at work? So when we came to the decision, I survived first year, and I survived with quite a good GPA. So after the learning curve, I kind of got my bearings, and then I said, mechanical's the thing. I have the
Might as well go
grades for it.
there. Yeah.
I'll apply, but I put materials as a second.
Yeah.
And I got mechanical, and then I just
roll right in.
Rolled right into it. And I think actually before I was signing my paper, I just remember, I think my grandfather had passed at that time, and I was like I wonder what he would say. Like,
Yeah, he would have been so happy.
he would have been so happy, right?
Yeah.
So I think I had like a dream or something, and he said like, just go into mechanical, right? It's like more
It
math.
was sent
It was
to
more
you.
math. So I was like, like mechanical. Anyway, so that's how that came about. Luckily for me, like I did quite well because I had already seen a lot of things. I had built a lot of things. And when I did mechanical, especially in the design competitions, like my team always came out on top. Right? I think we won like the second year competition. We actually had to build something. We won first place, and that was awesome, right? Like that was another high. It was like, okay, like being out in the field before doing engineering actually really does help.
Oh, for sure. Like, I mean, in my experience, I know it does, but as a welder now, you're in the college now, you're in the mechanical engineering world, and you're starting to take your classes. I'm sure in conversation in terms of like first day at school, introductions, talking to the professors, people are finding out that you're a welder. So what was the attitude of perhaps the instructors and the other students when they found out you kind of had this previous life?
Well, I think it was quite positive. I think in second year, people wanted me on their team, obviously. But
he can do stuff.
he can do stuff. But I think the thing that mostly stood out was my current professor, like Professor Mendes. When I first started interacting with him, he was like, "Oh, what? Like you have like real world like life experience like in welding? Oh, come to the lab. Come check out the lab." It was very contagious energy, right? So I in second year, I quickly got drawn to the lab. I already had acquaintance with him. So it was kind of natural. I actually think I ran into him in the hallway, and I went into his office like, "Hey, like, remember me?" And then he's like, "Oh, like you're back. Okay, perfect." So and he invited me to the lab. I ended up doing a couple Dean's Research Award projects, so undergraduate research in his lab. And he invited me to do a master's right away after finishing. But at that time, I was like, okay, I just finished school. Like, I kind of collected a bunch of debt to get through school.
Need to work for a little bit.
Right? Need to work for a little bit. I mean, I was also helping my mom, so I said, you know what, I feel like I need to like take a break here. But during that time, before I graduated, I became a CWB level 1 inspector.
Okay.
In my, I think it was like after first year, because obviously you see the QC guys and they're just coming and look at your welds.
Yeah.
And I think one time when I was welding on the reformer furnace, I had this guy who had never touched a stinger or rod in his life.
Yeah.
He came to look at my weld. It was like a beautiful cap, and I had like one. I wouldn't even call it like arc strike.
Yeah.
It was like a tail out.
It was like an arc rub.
It was like a tail out from my TIG, and it was just like a barely even an arc strike. And then he looked at it. And he was like, I don't know, whatever. I smudged it out. I fixed it with like the file or whatever. But he looked at the whole weld, and then he turned at me. He's like, "Is this good?" And then I was like, oh man. Okay, so
So slight shade to the CWB Weld Inspection Program, but that's okay.
That's okay. That's
because
okay.
I personally have never wanted to be a weld narc, but that's okay.
Anyway, so after first year, I was like, you know what? I should just go do the level one. Let's. I should be like, I want to be inspecting because I'm sure I'll learn more.
And it is a good course.
It
you
is.
Learn a lot. Yeah,
you learn a lot. So I did my level one, and then that's actually what got me through second and third and fourth year because
for metallurgy,
I would start like financially.
Financially,
because
yeah.
As soon as as soon as the classes were done, I was hitting a shutdown somewhere, and I was able to learn there.
Yeah,
I learned a lot doing inspections, learning about quality programs and stuff like that. So learning more about NDE, and then after I graduated, that's when the decision had to be made. Okay, do you go straight into the master's or do you go
make some money for a bit?
So I said, okay, you know what? Like, I think I'm in a position where I need to just kind of capitalize. So I made a decision. I'm just going to go do my level 2, and maybe my API. Give me like at least a year or two just to
get some codes under your belt.
Get things going, and I'll come back after. So one thing led to another, of course. I became like QC lead for a little bit, and then I got my API 510, and then I started doing QA, and then I started working in oil sands. And my manager in the oil sands, who's very supportive, I might add, said, "Hey, you also have an engineering degree?" He's like, "Oh, come do engineering." So then I started doing like working as an engineer. Eventually got my PEng, doing mechanical engineering work. Which I found very, very fun because it's like you actually get to design the repair. Like, okay, something
on
broken,
the thing that's right there.
On the thing that's right there. So I loved being able to go out, look at the thing that's broken. Oh, like furnace needs a new roof or something like that. Or this pipe is really messed up. Or how can we redesign this pipe so that it works better? Yeah, I found that awesome because I was able to tie in my previous welding experience, my mechanical engineering education,
and your inspection,
and my inspection, and it was kind of organic because I was able to communicate with all these different groups, right? So then that led to the offer, like, hey, do you want to be a technical leader for turnarounds? So then I said, okay, well, yeah, I think that'll be fun. So then I kind of got a little bit more into the business side of things. But which is important because you learn how things move, how you scope a turnaround, how you make sure a plant is reliable for a mission run, that type of thing. So definitely learned a ton. You interact with many groups, even like process automation, electrical engineering. I learned a lot.
Other companies, QAs that you got.
Yes, absolutely. People from other countries. We had a company from Europe come over, and they weren't familiar with our Alberta way of doing things or quality programs. So you help them get up to speed. But anyway, once I worked as a technical leader for a bit, COVID happened, and Professor Mendez called me up and said, "Hey, are you interested in still doing a master's? Because everything's online." Yeah. And at that time, I was living in Fort McMurray, so I said, "Yeah, absolutely."
Better than sitting around.
Although I really do like doing turnarounds and
shutdowns,
the job that I was doing, shutdowns. I call them turnarounds lately, but shutdowns. I said, I honestly, I like to go back to the more technical aspect of things. I don't find it to be work. You know what I mean? So
it's just fun.
It's just fun, right? So I said, I'll do it self-funded, like for right now at least, just to get things going. So I finished all my courses during COVID. And then since COVID, I've been still working full-time and doing my master's part-time, doing my research, which has brought tremendous opportunities to collaborate with other people. We had some visiting students from Chile back in 2021. I did a project with them. People that don't know anything about welding. Right? So the programmers, right? Programmers need a project, right? And they need to be brought up to speed to that specific domain, right? For the knowledge in that area. So I found that great, being able to give back, provide
be a subject matter expert in
provide my experience to something that could be much more, right? So we ended up doing a project with artificial intelligence. It was for his master's in Chile. It was just like analyzing voltage and amperage signals to detect discontinuities in the weld. And anyway, I kept doing my own research, which I briefly talked about, and I'll be talking about in this conference, which is around the processing the high-speed videos, and which surfaced another opportunity with these students from Peru to actually be able to process these images with machine learning, so that we can get all sorts of data that validate equations that, well, I guess Professor Mendez has been developing for decades, right? So yeah, that's
like this cycle here has been super interesting, because I've worked with an engineer. He was head of engineering at Brandt Industries, who had his level 2 inspection. Had never been a welder, but at least went and got his level 1, did inspection for a bit, then his level 2, then he became an engineer, and then he became like head engineer, senior engineer for Brandt Industries. Nick Coleman, if you're listening, fantastic engineer. And he was the first engineer in my professional career that I was like, I like this guy. Because he understood what I was talking about from the floor. It wasn't like, oh, come sit in my office, show me on my computer what's not working. It's like, no, I'll come down to you, show me on the part where it's not working. You know, like, actually, I want to see, you know, why this piece doesn't fit, because you don't see that on the computer. We always used to have that conversation. It's like, well, the computer says it'll fit. What's the problem? You know, and I actually took so much of what he taught me in terms of engineering, that when I had to design courses for the engineering program in Regina, that I took some real life examples into some simple CAD work to show, you know, these CAD setups actually are impossible. The computer will 100% tell you, yeah, this is go with it, run it. It's where it's all specced out, and it's actually physically impossible to make that a real part. You know what I mean? And that type of field experience is crucial. How do you feel about that? Like, in terms of what you know in real design, like in terms of building, and then in terms of design now in the meta world.
In the meta world. Do you mean that literally, like in the meta world? Because that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, well, not we won't go there yet.
Okay. Well, I feel I'm very thankful for the experience that I've had and the path that I've chosen, obviously. So whenever there is an issue, my first thing is, okay, let's go look at it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's get our hands on it. Or if we looked at it and it's still not making sense,
let's cut it apart.
Let's cut it apart. Or first, let's look at history.
Right.
Let's talk to people. Let's reach out. Right. If the people are still there. If not, you kind of have to call around other parts of the world. I mean, it's happened. It's happened.
Yeah. Find some collaboration. Right? Yeah.
Find some collaboration. Talk to the license owners of the equipment and be like, hey, you sold these reactors to other people in the world. Like, have they had the same issue?
Yeah.
So things aren't making sense here.
Yeah.
Right. So I think if anybody has that opportunity to get that hands-on experience, or even if they don't get it first, if they go to engineering first, it doesn't have a price to look at something and tie the two together. Right.
Yeah. And the education that you're doing now with your master's, with you still working full-time, you said, so are you still full-time working right now?
Yeah, but I'm looking to transition over, hopefully, in the near future.
Are you working full-time as an engineer?
Yeah, still as a technical leader.
All right. And masters now, how far are you from completing your master's?
Oh, great question, because
I don't know.
Obviously,
yeah. What's the goal?
The goal, I would like to transition over to a PhD, definitely.
Oh, here you go. You have been talking a lot to Dr. Mendez.
Yeah. Well, I think that was always the plan from the beginning. It's just finding the right time. And I think the time is coming where I'll have a little bit more space. We moved back to Edmonton. We're living close to the university. My wife and I and our son, Sebastian.
Oh, wow.
Right?
It's a good name.
Good name, right? So anyway, we live close to the university, and just the hopping and skipping away is just the right time hasn't come yet, but I think it's coming soon. So when the time is right, I'll make the switch over.
How long do you think this master's project that you're working on in terms of thesis?
I mean, if I'd stay the master's, I'd hope by next year.
Yeah. And so what is a little bit of the presentation that you're doing today?
A little bit of the presentation I'm doing today, I'll pretty much showcase the work that we've done today to measure arc length and distinguish the different characteristics within the gas metal arc welding arc. In spray transfer for aluminum, we've been working a lot with 4043, primarily with 1.2 millimeter, 1.6 millimeter, and just tying the data that we can extract from those images back to a voltage model with the intent to help welding engineers when they're designing a welding procedure. Because this is another issue that I have encountered, even as a welder, something doesn't work, up 5, down 5, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you figure it out,
but if, let's say, you don't have that experience and you're trying to design something for potentially a new material, a novel material, what would be a good starting point?
Yeah.
If you have an analytical solution and the data to back it up and validate it, you'd be able to have your starting point. So instead of up, down, up 5, down 5, 30 times.
Listen to the hiss.
Maybe you can just, reduce your number of iterations to get to your desired parameters. Right?
So what's the end tool of this project? What is it you see as the implementation or?
Implementation for me, I think in the long term, hopefully after the PhD, be able to come up with a practical set of equations to give to welding engineers or even, like welding technologists or welding professionals. And say, hey, like the voltage, we're welding this. Okay, well, if you want the bead to look like this is what your arc length will be if your voltage settings and current settings are this. Yeah. Right? If with whatever machine you have, or if you're welding and your welding leads are 100 meters long. Yeah. Things will change. Things will change, right? But this is how you can approach it. Yeah. And instead of having 100 iterations, or let's say even 10 iterations, maybe you just have 2 or 3. Right. And I think that in itself is valuable because we run into a lot of troubleshooting, which is very costly in the industry.
Now, what about the new synergic systems in welding? Don't they kind of cover some of those bases in terms of they're monitoring the voltage internally in the welder's computer? They're adjusting voltages for you based off arc length and penetration. Is there going to be a compatibility with what you're saying and what, because on a synergic system you're not picking voltage at all, you're just picking puddle features basically. How does that fit in that world?
I think I haven't looked too far into that, but I know looking at research presentations recently,
this week,
or last month, and they're talking about, okay, for this puddle dimension, we raised the arc or lower the arc. So I went and talked to them. So how are you measuring the arc? Like, how are you quantifying that? And they're like, kind of just eyeball it. Like, I don't know, go by the. I'm like, okay. So I think there's a contribution here. Yeah,
and that's actually true because when it does come to synergic, when I got trained on synergic welding machines, they're like, picture a baseline. Your weld is a circle. Or do you want to go up? Or do you want to go down? And you just dial up and dial down. And I was like, okay, well, that's a really easy way to teach it to students and to get them to get nice bead results. But what's actually happening? Yeah. That's right. And now, do you see this weld tool almost being like, could perhaps it just be like an app? And I'd be like, hey, 1/2-inch plate, 1.045 LS96, whatever,
How long are your leads? What kind of torch are you using?
And you should be around, 27 volts at whatever.
And that will give you this bead width or bead height, and your arc length will be this long. I mean, I think arc length, even when I think back of when I'm welding, we kind of just we don't quantify arc length as welders, I find. Yeah. We know qualitatively is like, this is long arc, short arc. Yeah. Short arc. But you don't know how long that is. Yeah. Right? It's good and it's bad.
Yeah. You can hear it. You can smell.
Yeah. How much is it?
Yeah. Right? Yeah.
So I think getting that granular to be able to say, hey, like this is 10 millimeters if you have shielding, or this is 1 millimeter. Yeah. This results in this.
This is a negative millimeter. You're driving it into your puddle.
Yes, exactly. And that, hey, very dark, real thing.
Yeah, it is a real thing. Yeah,
absolutely. And I've actually started kind of looking at how am I going to quantify this
if I can't even see the arc? Yeah. You have to go like X-ray driven sensors or something.
There's ways. I mean, there's ways, but
well, you can just feed you could record the feedback loop on the voltage.
I mean, cross sections. I mean, we could get into this, but I think from a high speed video perspective, it was quite challenging to get the angle right and like maybe look down.
Well, cameras is tough. I think about it all the time. We've worked with a few, and as a welder and a person who loves the also the science ends of welding, I've worked with Cavatars, I've worked with Xyrus, I've worked with a few ocular systems, and at the end of the day, they all have their pluses, they all have their minuses, and then I always feel like they're not exactly what I'm trying to see. You know what I mean? Like there's something like maybe I watch too much Star Trek or something. Like I want to put a camera to follow a weld and give me all the information I want. Like, can't we just do that? I want heats. I want distances. I want to know. I want sharpness and clarity. I want to see penetration like an X-ray. Like, can't we, like we can put people on or machines on Mars? You tell me we can't do that? Like,
Yeah.
what do you think? Is it coming?
Eventually. Sky's the limit. Really.
All right, so we're getting the nod here to wrap up. Let's talk about the conference real quick. How's this experience been this week at CanWeld?
I think it's been fantastic. I really like, in contrast to last year when we had FabTech and this just being an isolated event.
Yeah, this is the close homey one.
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. No, I love seeing the progress from fellow researchers and fellow students from other universities that I met last year and just get to meet with them. Obviously, like the keynote speakers, like the whole theme is very good, and I like that it's just us, right? It's not like the distraction of FabTech is, if you're here for. Well,
at the big CanWeld FabTechs, there's a lot of a sales component of all the machines and all the suppliers. Here it's just like welders and engineers. Like let's just hang out and talk, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome.
Not to bash the other.
No, we love them all. And June
them all.
11th to 13th in Toronto. We'll see you.
Absolutely. But I mean, it's a different dynamic.
It is. And then we don't want to ever get rid of it. People ask us, are we going to just do maybe every 2 years? It's like, no, I like the juxtaposition between the two of them. They're very different. And I think they're both worthy for their different reasons. So
absolutely. And at the same time, like as a student, it's a good goal for yourself. It's like, hey, what are you presenting at CanWeld? Right? Okay, like this is my goal. This is what I want to show.
I have to have it ready by then.
And it puts that stress on the community, really, because that's really, if you put that stress, you'll get the results, right?
That's right. Any shout outs you want to throw out to anybody before we wrap it up?
I mean, well, obviously my group at the CCWJ, Professor Mendez, and my family, of course.
All right. Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Eddie. It's been a lot of fun having you here. I think this is the last podcast we have for the week here at CanWeld. It's been tons of fun. Today's day 3. I have my last presentation in about an hour, I think. And then it's the VIP party sponsored by ApprenticeSearch.com. Check them out. If you're looking for apprentices and need workers, they're the ones to go to. And well, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much.
All right. And everyone that keep downloading and sharing the podcast. It's been tons of fun out here. We're getting tired, but we got to push through. And I can't wait to get more content out for you in the next few weeks. So keep on keeping on, and we'll see you soon.
We hope you enjoyed the show.